Hey everyone, my name is Pranshul and welcome to the first video of Music Fundamentals. Let's jump right in. In order to read music, you must first know what clef it is in. A clef is a symbol that will tell you which note lies on what line or space of the staff. We will talk about the staff later in the video. There are two main clefs in music, the treble clef and the bass clef. Each of these clefs has its own video, so make sure to check those out. Now, let's talk about the different note values. The first note looks like an open circle, and this is called a whole note. The whole note will take up the whole amount of the measure, and we'll talk about measures later on in this video as well. The next note looks like a whole note, but it has a stem, which is the line that is going upwards. This is called a half note. Two half notes can fit into one whole note. The next note is a quarter note. This is similar to a half note, but it is filled in. Two quarter notes can fit into a half note, and four quarter notes can fit into a whole note. The next note is an eighth note. This note contains both a stem, which is the line going upwards, and a flag, which is the little line coming off of it. Two eighth notes can fit into a quarter note, four eighth notes can fit into a half note, and eight eighth notes can fit into a whole note. The last note we will cover today is the 16th note. This note contains two flags. Two 16th notes can fit into an eighth note, four 16th notes can fit into a quarter note, eight 16th notes can fit into a half note, and 16 16th notes can fit into a whole note. I highly recommend you understand and memorize what each note looks like and understand its relationship to other notes. Any note that contains a flag can be connected, and what I mean by that is that the notes, instead of the flags being present, there will be a line occurring. I wanted to make sure we cover this so you are not confused when you see this occur in music. Keep in mind that connecting notes does not change the value of the note. Connecting the notes just makes it easier to read the music, especially when you see many notes with flags occurring simultaneously. So, the top example is two eighth notes. Instead of writing the two notes separately, we can write them connected with a single line between the notes. The flags disappear and only the line is left. This bottom example is 16th notes, and the same as 8th notes, we just connect the two notes using the lines. The number of flags corresponds to the number of lines used to connect the notes. Usually, you will only see four notes connected at a time, and you may see different notes being connected. We will cover that in another video. For right now, just remember that notes can be connected, and it is a very common occurrence in music. Each note will also have a corresponding rest. A rest is a symbol that means do not play. Just like with notes, we have whole rests, half rests, quarter rests, eighth rests, and 16th rests. The rests have the same relationships as the note values. For example, two half rests can fit into a whole rest, two quarter rests can fit into a half rest, and four quarter rests will fit into a whole rest. The quarter rest kind of looks like a squiggly 3. The 8th rest has one flag coming off of it. The 16th rest has two flags coming off of it. You will see that these rests are very similar to the note they correspond with. Rests are just as important as the notes themselves. So just like the notes, make sure you understand and memorize the different rests as well. So once again, for 16th rest, you'll have 16 16th rests in a whole rest. Make sure you understand that. Now let's talk about what you will see when you look at a piece of music. The piece of music will have staves. The staves consist of 5 lines and 4 spaces, each of which corresponds to its own note, and we'll talk about notes later on as well. The staff is usually split by a line down the center, and this line we'll make it into two sections for this example, and each of these sections is called a measure. We will talk more about this in future videos. Let me go ahead and draw another staff so we can talk a little bit more about this. Give me just a second. So, in this staff, at the beginning of every staff, it'll consist of a clef and a time signature. So we talked about clefs a little bit earlier on in this video, and now let's go ahead and talk about time signatures. These two concepts are very important to reading, writing, and playing music, so understand them. So let's go ahead and talk about time signatures. Time signatures consist of two numbers stacked on top of each other. It is almost like a fraction, and as you get more comfortable with music, you will see over time there is a small amount of math incorporated into music. So, a time signature consists of two numbers. The top number is the number of beats per measure, and the bottom number is the type of note that receives one beat. The time signature that is written is read as 4/4. The top number is said followed by the bottom number. So it's very important that you also know how to say these musical terms, so when you're talking to somebody about music, you can communicate with them. And like I said previously, music is just like a language, so it's going to take some time to learn. So the top number is said followed by the bottom number. Okay, the bottom number can only consist of real note values, and what I mean when I say that is that it must correspond to a note we talked about, such as a quarter note or half note or 16th note. A quarter note would correspond to a 4, a half note would be a 2, and an eighth note would be an 8th, and so on and so forth. So a 16th note would be a 16th. There's no such thing as a third note, so you cannot have a 3 as the bottom number. The top number can be any whole number, so you will see some obscure values on the top. Let's do some practice. The following are pretty common time signatures you will see along with 4/4. Pause the video and see if you can figure out what each of these time signatures represent. Okay, I assume you paused the video. Let's go over these practice problems. The leftmost one is 2/4. That means there are 2 beats per measure, and a quarter note represents 1 beat. Middle one is 3/4. That means there are 3 beats per measure, and a quarter note represents 1 beat. The rightmost is 6/8, which means there are 6 beats per measure, and an eighth note represents 1 beat. So here are a couple more practice ones to do on your own. I highly recommend you give them a shot and just try to figure out what each one represents. The left one would be 12/8 and the right one would be 2/2. So go ahead and try to practice with those. You will see that 2 time signatures can also be written with symbols. This is because these time signatures are very common in music. So give me a second to draw a staff out here. Okay. So the first symbol looks like a big C, and the other symbol is going to look like a big C with a line down the middle. The big C is called common time, and this is equivalent to 4/4. The C with the line down the middle is called cut time, and this is the same as 2/2. Cut time means that there are 2 beats per measure, and a half note receives 1 beat. That's all the material I wanted to cover in this introductory video. If there are any topics that confuse you, I encourage you to watch the video again. Keep an eye out for more videos about music fundamentals, and I will see you next time.